They told her to calm down. They told her to stop panicking. They told her the machines did not lie, and that her daughter was already lost. But here's the part they would not put in any report. The doctors were wrong. The protocol was dangerous, and one well-behaved signature away from silence almost ended a child's life. In this story, a mother is labeled difficult, irrational, even threatening. Security is called. Warnings are issued. Careers are protected. And behind closed doors, decisions are made that no parent is ever supposed to question. She noticed something no one wanted to hear. She remembered a detail everyone dismissed. And she crossed a line the system punishes, not because it's illegal, but because it's inconvenient. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some hospitals fear parents who ask questions, why already too late is sometimes a lie, and why the most shocking moment of this story does not happen in the ICU. It happens after the child survives. Watch until the end, because the truth they tried to bury comes last. She learned that her daughter was dying from a sound, not from words. The monitor changed its rhythm first. It did not scream or flatline the way it did in movies. It hesitated. A thin, uncertain stutter slipped into the steady beeping, as if the machine itself was confused, as if it wanted permission to continue. The sound crept into her bones before her mind understood it. She was standing by the window outside the intensive care unit, counting the cracks in the glass because looking directly at her daughter felt impossible. There were 7 long fractures running from the lower corner upward, like frozen lightning. She was on the 5th when the sound changed. At first, she thought it was her imagination. Grief had already begun to warp time, stretch seconds into something thick and unmanageable. But then a nurse looked up too quickly. Then another machine responded, a soft mechanical sigh adjusting itself to a new reality. No one spoke. The hallways smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Somewhere behind a closed door, someone laughed, too loudly, and the sound felt obscene. When the doctor finally approached her, he did not look surprised. That was the first thing that frightened her. His face had the calm expression of a man arriving late to a conclusion he had already accepted. "We're reaching the limits," he said quietly. He did not say her daughter's name. He did not say the word dying. He did not need to. He gestured toward a clipboard and asked her to follow him into a small room with no windows and one plastic chair. The papers were already prepared. They lay on the table in a neat stack, warm from someone else's hands. She stared at them and thought, absurdly, that they felt alive. Warmth meant circulation. Warmth meant time had been invested in this outcome. "What happens if I do not sign?" she asked. The doctor paused, just long enough. "We'll continue supportive care," he said, which meant nothing would change. She nodded, as if she understood, as if she agreed. She did not touch the pen. Inside the intensive care unit, her daughter lay impossibly still. Tubes traced delicate, invasive paths across her small body. Machines breathed for her, measured her, corrected her. The girl who had once argued loudly about bedtime and slammed doors and laughed with her mouth full now depended entirely on borrowed rhythm. That morning she had complained about a headache. Not even complained, really, just mentioned it in passing, the way children do when pain feels inconvenient rather than alarming. She had said the room smelled strange, like metal and smoke, and asked if the lights were flickering. Her mother had touched her forehead, felt warmth, and told herself it was another virus, another ordinary illness that would pass. They had joked about hospital food. They had argued about bringing a jacket. By afternoon, her daughter could not stand. By evening, she could not speak clearly. By night, they were running down corridors. Everything after that blurred into sharp fragments. The cold edge of a gurney pressing into her palms. A nurse asking the same questions again and again, as if repetition might summon a different answer. Dates, allergies, last meal, time of onset. As if this were an event with a clean beginning. When the doctors spoke, they spoke with certainty. Certainty built on probability, on experience, on patterns seen hundreds of times before. They used words like aggressive and unresponsive. They said they were doing everything they could. At some point, one of them said, "We need to prepare you." That was when she felt it. Not fear exactly. Fear was too small, too polite. This was something heavier. A sense that the room was tilting, that gravity itself was rearranging around her. She tried to tell them about the smell her daughter had mentioned, about the way she had said the world looked wrong, stretched at the edges, about the headache that came suddenly, violently, without warning. "It's consistent with the diagnosis," one of them said gently. She nodded. She had already learned that nodding made conversations end faster. Hours passed, or minutes. Time stopped obeying any familiar rules. When the doctor said, "I'm sorry," she felt an unexpected surge of anger. Not because he was wrong, but because he was calm. Because he had the luxury of acceptance. "I want another scan," she said. He shook his head. It would not change the outcome. "I want another blood test." "We've run everything indicated." She swallowed. Her mouth tasted like copper. "There's one more," she said, and now her voice was shaking. "There's a rare condition. It does not show up right away. The treatment you're using makes it worse." The room went quiet. The doctor looked at her with something that bordered on pity. "I understand you're looking for hope," he said carefully. "But this is not the time to chase unlikely possibilities." Unlikely. She looked back at the papers on the table, at the line waiting for her signature, at the implication embedded in every blank space. She thought of a moment years earlier, standing in line at a clinic, pregnant and exhausted, when she had struck up a conversation with a man behind her. He had been a doctor, not her doctor, just a stranger complaining about hospital bureaucracy. They had talked for 15 minutes, long enough to exchange names, long enough for him to scribble his number on a receipt and say, half joking, "Call me if you ever need a second opinion." She had never called. Until now. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. It rang longer than she expected. With every second, she imagined the sound in the intensive care unit changing again, slipping into something final. He answered, confused, half asleep. She did not introduce herself. She did not explain politely. She said words like now and wrong and dying in a rush that barely resembled language. There was silence on the other end. Then he started asking questions, specific ones, different ones. When she told him about the smell, about the distorted vision, about the sudden collapse, his tone changed. "Tell them to stop," he said. "They will not listen." "Make them listen." She went back into the hallway and raised her voice for the first time since arriving. She said names she had memorized from badges. She said words like liability and protocol and external review. She demanded a test that most of the staff had never ordered in their careers. Security was called. When they tried to guide her away, she sat down on the floor outside the intensive care unit and refused to move. She said calmly that if her daughter died, she would remember every face in this hallway for the rest of her life. Something shifted then. Not compassion, fear. The test was ordered. No one looked at her while they waited for the results. She counted the cracks in the glass again. 7. Always 7. When the doctor returned, his certainty was gone. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He simply said, "We're changing the treatment." Inside the intensive care unit, the machines adjusted. The sound steadied. She did not breathe until she heard it. The change in treatment did not look heroic. There was no dramatic rush, no sudden reversal, no visible miracle. A nurse adjusted a drip. A doctor rewrote an order. A medication with a long, unfamiliar name replaced another that had sounded reassuringly standard. The machines continued their work with the same indifferent patience as before. For several hours, nothing happened. This was almost worse. Hope, when it arrives too early, feels like a lie. She sat rigid in the plastic chair, afraid to move, afraid to think too far ahead, afraid that any emotional shift might somehow disturb the fragile balance that had been restored. Every sound felt amplified. Every footstep in the corridor sounded like an announcement. The staff avoided her eyes. She noticed it immediately. The subtle shift in posture when they entered the room, the careful neutrality in their voices. She was no longer simply a grieving mother. She was a problem, a complication, a reminder that certainty could fracture. A young nurse lingered by the bed longer than necessary, checking the same numbers twice. When their eyes met, the nurse looked away quickly, as if ashamed. "Is she stable?" the mother asked. The nurse hesitated. For now was not a promise. It was a delay. Time stretched again, but differently now. Before, it had felt like falling. Now it felt like standing on the edge of something narrow, suspended over an unseen drop. She replayed the day over and over, hunting for signs she might have missed earlier. The way her daughter had squinted at the sunlight, the sudden irritability, the way she had stopped mid-sentence, searching for a word she had always known. Each memory arrived sharpened by guilt. At some point near dawn, exhaustion finally overtook fear. She slept sitting upright, head tilted against the wall, dreaming of hallways that never ended. She woke to silence, not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind. For a fraction of a second, panic seized her chest, but then she heard it. The monitor, steady and unhurried, slower than before, stronger. A doctor stood at the foot of the bed, studying the screen with intense focus. His shoulders were tense, his hands clasped behind his back. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice hoarse. He turned to her slowly. "No," he said. "Something is different." Different was not reassurance, but it was not despair either. They ran the tests again, the same rare test she had fought for hours earlier. This time, the results arrived faster, as if the hospital itself had decided to take the situation seriously now that it had been embarrassed. The diagnosis was confirmed. The original treatment, administered correctly and confidently, had been accelerating the damage. The new medication was crude by comparison, aggressive in ways that made the staff uncomfortable, but it was the right weapon for the right enemy. The doctor did not meet her eyes when he explained this. "We followed protocol," he said. as if reciting a defense already prepared. "I know," she replied. But knowing did not soothe her. It terrified her, because protocol had almost killed her child. Over the next 2 days, her daughter hovered between states, awake but confused, asleep but restless. Her hands twitched. Her breath hitched occasionally, sending spikes of fear through her mother's chest. Once, briefly, her daughter opened her eyes and whispered, "It still smells strange." The mother smiled and lied, telling her it would go away soon. She did not leave the hospital. She washed her face in bathroom sinks and changed clothes brought by friends who did not know what to say. She ate vending machine crackers without tasting them. She learned the rhythm of the ward, the shift changes, the subtle differences between day doctors and night doctors. Some were kind, some were distant. A few were openly resentful. One senior physician pulled her aside on the 3rd day. "You put us in a difficult position," he said. She waited. "If the outcome had been worse," he continued, "your actions could have complicated things significantly." She looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how many times he had said similar things to other families, always protected by hypotheticals. "But it was not worse," she said. "It's better." He exhaled sharply. "For now." That phrase again. For now. On the 4th day, her daughter had a seizure. It came without warning, violent and sudden. Alarms screamed, bodies moved, orders were shouted. The mother was pushed back against the wall as the room filled with people. She watched helplessly as her child's body betrayed her again, twisting against its own will. When it ended, the doctor's face was grim. "This condition does not reverse cleanly," he said. "There may be lasting effects." Lasting effects. The words fell like stones. "What kind of effects?" she asked. He hesitated. "We would not know right away." That night, alone in the dim light of the ICU, she allowed herself to imagine futures she had not dared to consider before. A child who might never fully recover. A life permanently altered by a delay, by a misdiagnosis, by a system that had almost moved on too quickly. Anger rose in her, sharp and bitter. Not just at the doctors, but at herself. At the version of her who had hesitated, who had doubted her own instincts, who had almost been polite to the end. The next morning, the improvement began slowly, almost imperceptibly. Her daughter slept longer. The numbers stabilized. The tremors lessened. Her eyes focused more clearly when she woke. On the 6th day, she asked for juice. The nurse laughed, surprised, and hurried to comply. It felt obscene to feel joy in that moment, as if celebrating too early might anger the fragile balance again. The mother pressed her forehead gently against her daughter's hand and closed her eyes. Recovery was not linear. Some days were good. Some days felt like setbacks. There were whispers about neurological damage, about rehabilitation, about things that might never return to normal. Each conversation carried a subtext the mother now recognized easily. This could have been avoided, but no one would say it out loud. When her daughter was finally transferred out of intensive care, the hallway seemed impossibly bright, too loud, too alive. Other families passed them, some smiling, some hollow-eyed. The mother wondered which ones had accepted already too late without question. A week later, she was called into an administrative office, 2 people sat across from her, neatly dressed, voices smooth. They thanked her for her cooperation. They expressed relief at the positive outcome. They suggested, gently, that it might be best for everyone if the incident were not discussed publicly. There were no violations, one of them said, just an unfortunate overlap of rare circumstances. She understood then that the story was already being rewritten. "What happens if I do not agree?" she asked. They exchanged a look. "There would be no benefit," the other replied. She left the office shaking, fury burning under her skin. Her daughter was alive, healing. That was supposed to be enough. But every time she closed her eyes, she heard the phrase again. Already too late. She knew now how easily those words could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The first thing they taught her daughter in rehabilitation was how to stand without trusting her legs. "Your body remembers," the therapist said gently, positioning her hands at the girl's waist, "even when it feels like it does not." The room smelled faintly of rubber mats and disinfectant. Sunlight streamed through large windows, too cheerful for the work being done inside them. Other children moved slowly across the floor, some with braces, some with scars still visible above their collars. Her daughter hated it. She clenched her jaw, her frustration raw and immediate. She had always been stubborn, always impatient with her own limits, and now her body had betrayed her in ways she did not yet have the language to describe. "I was fine before," she said one afternoon, tears streaking silently down her face. "They broke me." The mother had no answer that would not shatter them both. Progress came in fragments, a step without assistance, a clear sentence without searching for words, a day without dizziness. Each small victory carried the weight of what might never return. The doctors spoke carefully now. No certainty, no promises, only cautious optimism layered over legal language. "We did everything appropriately," one of them said during a follow-up appointment, eyes fixed on the chart. The mother smiled tightly. She had learned that smile. At home, the world felt unfamiliar. The house was the same, but the rules had changed. Sharp corners were padded. Routines were rewritten. Silence was no longer comforting. It was suspicious. Her daughter startled easily. Loud noises sent her hands trembling. Sometimes she stopped mid-conversation, eyes unfocused, as if listening to something only she could hear. "It smells strange again," she said once, late at night. The mother sat up immediately, heart racing, only to realize the smell was rain through an open window. Still, she did not sleep afterward. Weeks passed, then months. Life did not return to normal. It reassembled into something adjacent, something that required constant vigilance. The mother learned to live in a permanent state of readiness, a quiet tension humming beneath every ordinary moment. People called her brave, strong, a hero. She hated it. Bravery implied choice. Strength implied resilience without cost. None of those words acknowledged the terror of standing alone against certainty, of being labeled difficult while your child slipped towards silence. One afternoon, she received a letter. It was formal, polite, carefully worded. The hospital thanked her for her feedback. It informed her that an internal review had been completed and no systemic issues had been identified. It reassured her that protocols existed for a reason, and that deviations carried risks. She read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. That night, she opened her laptop and began to write. At first, it was just for herself, a way to arrange the chaos into something linear. She described the sound of the monitor changing, the warmth of the papers waiting for her signature, the phrase that had nearly ended everything, already too late. She did not name names. She did not accuse. She simply told the story. When she posted it online, she did not expect anyone to read it. By morning, thousands had. Messages flooded in. Parents, nurses, doctors, people who had been told the same words, who had accepted them, who had lost someone because they had been polite, trusting, quiet. Some thanked her. Others were furious. A few accused her of fear-mongering, of undermining trust in medicine, of encouraging dangerous behavior. The hospital contacted her within days. This time, they did not ask her to be quiet. They asked her to clarify, then to edit, then to remove the post entirely. She refused. What followed was subtle at first. Appointments canceled, phone calls unanswered, a sudden difficulty accessing specialists. Nothing explicit, nothing provable. Her daughter noticed before she did. "They do not like us," she said one evening, not accusing, just stating a fact. The mother hugged her tightly and said nothing. The story continued to spread. A journalist reached out, then another. The phrase "already too late" appeared in headlines, in opinion pieces, in forums where exhausted families shared survival strategies. The hospital issued a statement expressing concern over misinformation. A review was announced. This time, it was public. The mother sat in the back of a crowded room while administrators spoke in smooth, measured tones about complexity and rarity and the dangers of hindsight. When it was her turn, she stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She described the smell, the sound, the paper waiting for her signature. She described being told that hope was unreasonable. The room was silent when she finished. Nothing dramatic happened afterward. No apologies, no resignations, no sweeping reform. But a month later, a new guideline was quietly added. A footnote, really. A recommendation to consider rare differentials when certain symptoms were present. A suggestion, not a mandate. It was not justice. It was not enough. But it was something. Years later, her daughter walked without assistance. She laughed loudly again. She complained about homework and rolled her eyes at her mother's worry. There were still limitations, still scars, visible and invisible. Still moments when the world tilted unexpectedly. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sky darken, her daughter asked a question that stopped her breath. "What if you had listened to them?" The mother did not answer right away. "I would have lost you," she said finally. Her daughter nodded, absorbing this quietly. "Do they know that?" she asked. The mother looked out into the fading light, thinking of protocols and paperwork and certainty delivered with calm authority. "I do not think they're taught to know that," she said. Later that night, she returned to the post she had written years earlier and reread the final lines. She added one sentence. "If someone tells you it is already too late, make them prove it." She closed the laptop. Somewhere, in a hospital corridor not unlike the one she had once paced in silence, a machine changed its rhythm. And a mother looked up, just in time.